Hello and welcome. In this unit, we are going to define communication. We will state the functions of communication, and we will look at the different forms and types of communication. Different scholars have defined communication in various ways. Some of them refer to it as the transfer of meaning, some talk about it as a transmission of stimuli, while others say it is one mind affecting another. Some say it is the sharing of experiences on the basis of commonness. Communication is not static, but it is a dynamic process, and for it to be complete and effective, it has to achieve the desired objective as intended by the communicator. For example, in a classroom situation, the teacher has to make special efforts to convey the message to the learners. If the teacher defines the objectives of the lesson clearly and delivers the message with the help of appropriate verbal and written signals and body behavior or language, and the learners have understood the meaning as intended by the teacher, then one can conclude that communication, or at least effective communication, has taken place. Among other functions of communication, there is control, motivation, emotional expression, and information sharing. These functions can be expanded into other sub-areas such as education and training, socialization of human beings, entertainment, persuasion, and the preservation of culture. There are 5 main forms of communication. Firstly, there is what is called intrapersonal communication, which basically denotes communication within yourself, for yourself, by yourself, and to yourself. This involves thinking, analyzing, dreaming, or even introspecting. For example, deciding what food to eat or solving a problem in your head at the physiological level and sensory level, that knowing feeling of hunger in your stomach, and even the urge to relieve yourself are internal forms of communication. The levels of intrapersonal communication vary from one person to the other. Thinkers and philosophers have devoted quite a lot of time to intrapersonal communication in an attempt to understand the psychology of an individual. Some theories that attempt to explain intrapersonal communication are symbolic interaction theory, the looking glass self theory, social cognition, and attribution theory. The second form of communication is interpersonal communication, where two persons communicate with each other. Our everyday exchanges, whether formal or informal, can be classified as interpersonal communication. For this to work, there's a certain level of proximity between the sender and the receiver which should be achieved. This involves being able to watch the facial expressions, the postures, gestures, and general body movements or body language. In addition, the tone of the communicator's voice and facial expressions are communicated and need to be interpreted. In interpersonal communication, there are many sensory channels which are used. One of the most important aspects of interpersonal communication is feedback. Feedback in interpersonal communication is almost immediate. It allows communicators to verify what they have heard or seen. There are many contextual clues in interpersonal communication that help you understand the message as it is intended by the sender. These could be nonverbal signals. Some of the theories of interpersonal communication include politeness theory, social exchange theory, accommodation theory, uncertainty reduction, among others. The third form of communication is group communication. As the name suggests, this is communication that involves more than two people. Group communication can be both formal and informal. The dynamics in group communication are different from interpersonal and intrapersonal communication. For formal groups such as our class or your study group or even a group composed of board members in a meeting, it is always important that the composition, the nature, the role, and objectives of the group are clearly defined. so that the group becomes effective in its communication and achievement of its objectives. Feedback in a group is much slower compared to interpersonal communication because there are many players and there is a need for consensus to decide the way forward. Some of the theories that explain group communication are systems theory paradigm, the rhetorical theories paradigm, and the human rules paradigm, among others. The fourth form of communication is known as mass communication. Mass communication is different from the first three we have looked at in the sense that the communicator is usually far from the audience in terms of time and place or distance. Communication in this case takes place with the help mainly of electronic devices. These devices are known as mass media, hence the term mass communication. Some of the types of mass media are print media, such as books, pamphlets, broadcast media, such as TV and radio, digital media, and the internet, for example, social media in the form of Facebook, WhatsApp, and many others. In these mass media, one can send a message to a number of individuals who will be able to receive and read it at the same time. The audience in mass communication are unknown to each other, and they are located in widespread geographical locations. Take note that feedback in mass communication is considered to be very weak and it is delayed compared to group and interpersonal communication. Some of the theories of mass communication are the magic bullet or the hypodermic needle theory, the two-step flow theory, the uses and gratifications theory, the agenda setting theory, and cultivation theory, among others. The last form of communication is public communication, where information is disseminated to a diverse group on a specific topic through the use of different platforms. A political rally is an example of public communication. A lecture delivered in an auditorium is public communication. In order to distinguish it from mass communication, we can say that the reach of public communication is not as big as mass communication. For this course, public communication can also be defined as one person addressing a large group of people. I mentioned these different theories for each form of communication to show you that scholars have tried to understand how each form works. But it's also important to know that these are interdependent and any one form can find itself simultaneously operating with another. Obviously, this depends on context. For purposes of this course, we will not look at these theories in detail, but we are going to focus on a developmental or historical approach on how these theories have evolved from linear ways of trying to understand communication to the most recent transactional ways of understanding how communication works. Having identified these different forms of communication, let's briefly mention the types of communication. These are oral or verbal communication, such as giving a speech or two people involved in a discussion. Written communication, such as a letter or email. Visual or graphic communication, such as road signs or using a bar chart to explain financial figures. And non-verbal communication, such as the use of gestures, dress, and touch. Check the comments section for links to specific areas addressed in this video.